Chapter 1365. In front of the city of Wei, the battle was fierce. When both sides were exhausted, Blacksmith Li appeared on the battlefield and won the battle with his hammer. The blue-robed mighty figure's forehead cracked and blood gushed out like a fountain. Bang! The mighty figure fell to the ground and blood stained the sand. The fierce battle ended like a farce. It was hard to believe, but they had to believe that the mighty figure from the god realm who beat up Jiming and the others was killed by Blacksmith Li's hammer. In the battle, the young man in green, the teacher, and Ning Chen were all stunned. They couldn't accept it. How could it be like this? As someone who had lived two lives, Ning Chen felt an inexplicable sadness in his heart. He had fought so hard for so long, but in the end, his head was taken away by someone else. Impressive! The young man in green cupped his hands and said, "The old blacksmith must have been here a long time ago. He had been hiding for this last moment. What a cunning old fox. He was still too young. The young man in green sighed in his heart. This time he was convinced. Impressive! The teacher also said calmly. Blacksmith Li grinned and said, "You're welcome. We're neighbors. It's only right to help each other." Ning Chen didn't want to pay attention to these shameless guys. He went forward to check the blue-robed old man's body and found many good things. Behind him, the young man in green, Blacksmith Li, and the teacher also went forward curiously to see what was there. There was a piece of divine iron, a bottle of pills, a jade slip, and a small brocade bag with a rusty key inside. The young man in green rubbed his hands and said, "Let's divide the loot." The teacher also stared at the loot without blinking. "Give this piece of broken iron to me." Blacksmith Li smiled honestly. The young man in green looked at him with disdain. The value of this piece of divine iron was no less than a city. Jade slip. The teacher said lightly. Seeing that the loot was about to be divided, the young man in green quickly said, "I want the pills." The three of them had already chosen the 4 items, leaving only a rusty key. The key was in the brocade bag. It was obvious that the blue-robed old man cared a lot about it. However, no matter how much he cared, it was still a broken key. "Brother Ning, this key might be a treasure. I'll give it to you," the young man in green said with a face full of pride. "Ah!" Ning Chen returned a smile and put away the key. He couldn't be bothered to look down on him anymore. "How should we deal with this old monster?" the young man in green asked. Ning Chen looked at the blue-robed eccentric on the ground and asked, "Which one of you knows how to search souls?" When the young man in green heard this, he was shocked and said, "I don't know such a vicious secret technique." Blacksmith Li also shook his head, indicating that he wouldn't. "You want to understand the cultivation method of my Dao sword?" the teacher asked. "Yes." Ning Chen nodded and smiled. "We don't know what kind of enemies we will encounter in the future. Learn more life-saving methods." The teacher was silent for a long time before he said calmly, "I will." This time, it was everyone's turn to be shocked. Ning Chen, Blacksmith Li, and the young man in cyan all looked at him. The imperial preceptor of the divine dynasty? A legendary Confucian figure? "I learned it when I was young. I've never used it before," the teacher said calmly. The three of them responded at the same time with fake smiles. They would be fools to believe this old man. The teacher didn't care. He stepped forward and pressed his right hand on the blue-robed eccentric's head, forcibly searching his soul. The dead had passed away, but the last 3 souls and 7 spirits hadn't dissipated. A strange light rose around the teacher as he searched for the blue-robed eccentric's remaining memories. After about an hour, the teacher stopped, and fatigue flashed in his eyes. "It's done." Under the three's gazes, the teacher said, "However, there's also a piece of bad news." "What bad news?" The young man in cyan was puzzled. "This person is an elder of the pantheon," the teacher said calmly. Cough, cough. The young man in cyan coughed violently. "Seems like we're in trouble." Blacksmith Li still had a simple and honest smile on his face. "Let's go back to the city." The young man in cyan turned around and walked toward the city without saying a word. Blacksmith Li followed and didn't stay outside the city for long. Ning Chen frowned and stepped forward to collect the blue-robed eccentric's body. He looked at the teacher and asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The teacher nodded. Let's go back to the city. After getting the answer, Ningchen didn't stay for a moment and walked toward the city of Wei. The four returned to the city. When they reached the city, they let out a sigh of relief. The Pantheon, this name was too scary. In the realm of the gods, it was one of the largest forces with countless divine demon experts. It was extremely terrifying. Every force in the realm of the gods had a branch of the Pantheon. The consequences of offending this force were very troublesome. In the east of the city, the four returned. In front of the blacksmith shop, the woman saw the four and asked gently, "How was it?" "It's settled," Blacksmith Li replied. "Then why do you look like that?" The woman was puzzled. "It seems like we got into trouble." Blacksmith Li grinned. "That person is an elder of the Pantheon." The woman's expression changed slightly when she heard this, but soon returned to normal. She said calmly, "It's okay. In the city of Wei, no matter if you're a tiger or a dragon, you have to lie down. No one dares to cause trouble." After that, the woman looked at the three and continued, "You're all injured. Come in and rest for a while." "Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you." Ningchen, the young man in green, and the teacher replied without any hesitation and walked towards the blacksmith shop. In the blacksmith shop, the woman poured tea for the three and prepared some food. In front of the table, the three ate and drank without any hesitation. The blacksmith stood at the side and grinned. It was rare that he didn't forge today. "What about the Pantheon?" The young man in green stuffed a dry biscuit into his mouth and asked vaguely. "I don't know." The teacher drank a cup of tea and replied. "Blacksmith Li, you're the one who killed him. What should we do?" The young man in green began to shirk the responsibility and asked. "Everyone did it together." Blacksmith Li smiled honestly and didn't take the blame at all. "Little brother Ning, you're the one who caused this trouble. Can you say something?" The young man in green continued to shirk the responsibility. "Everyone did it together." Ningchen didn't fall for it and replied. The young man in green looked at the two of them with disdain and continued to eat. The table of food was quickly cleaned up by the three. The big battle really tired the three of them. "Understand, I'll teach you the cultivation method of the path sword later," the teacher said lightly. "Thank you, teacher," Ningchen replied. "You'll take responsibility for this," the teacher said calmly with a matter-of-fact face. The young man in green who was drinking tea spat out the tea in his mouth and then coughed violently. "Brilliant, really brilliant." Ningchen looked at the teacher across the table. After a long time, he smiled and said, "The imperial preceptor of the divine dynasty, you live up to your reputation." "Undeserved reputation," the teacher said calmly. "All right." Ningchen nodded and said, "I'll take responsibility for this. However, if it's within my ability, shouldn't the three of you contribute as well?" "Sure." The three of them expressed their stance and agreed readily. Outside, the sky was getting dark. Ningchen, the teacher, and the young man in green were still sitting at the table and had no intention of leaving. However, the middle-aged woman who saw through the three men's intentions directly chased them out, driving them out. With a bang, the blacksmith shop's door closed. Blacksmith Li smiled honestly and revealed his white teeth. It was so dazzling. Night fell and the cold wind blew. The three of them stood outside shivering. The teacher had an indifferent expression and still maintained the posture of a legendary Confucian figure. The young man in green shrank his neck and tried his best to warm himself up. At the side, Ningchen held the illuminating self-Dao sword cultivation technique that the teacher had memorized. Under the dim moonlight, he felt a headache coming on. "Is it difficult?" Bored, the young man in green leaned forward and asked. "It's not easy," Ningchen replied. "This is a forbidden technique. If others know that you're cultivating this, you'll be hunted down," the young man in green reminded. "I'll just hide it and not let others find out." Ningchen said indifferently. "Hunted down?" He had been hunted down countless times and was long used to it. "Aren't you cold?" The young man in green shook his feet a few times and asked. "I have a cold attribute cultivation body." Ningchen smiled and said, "So, I'm more resistant to the cold than you." "Despicable." The young man in green said unhappily. The God-fiend laws in Weiqing City were too strong. They suppressed everyone's cultivation and made them similar to mortals. They understood the 6 desires and knew warmth and coldness. During the long night, Ning Chen studied the cultivation method of the illuminating self-Tao sword. Unknowingly, the night gradually passed. In the east, when the sky was about to brighten, the wooden house in front of them opened and a beautiful figure walked out. After resting for 2 days, Yun Mani's complexion was much better. Looking at the 3 people outside, she smiled and said, "I heard that you guys caused trouble?" The 3 of them looked at each other and turned to walk out of the city without saying a word. This girl was good-looking, but her mouth was too venomous. Every word she said was a sore spot. Behind them, Yun Mani revealed a bright smile. This was the first time in 1,000 years that she was so relaxed. If not for the mission, she really did not want to leave this paradise. Inside and outside the city, the 3 of them went back and forth, carrying wood back again and again. The task of rebuilding after the disaster was arduous. The 3 of them worked for more than 10 days before they rebuilt the wooden house. Looking at the brand new wooden house in front of them, the 3 of them had gratified expressions. It was not bad. When night fell, the 3 of them returned to their own wooden houses. They finally did not have to suffer the torment of the wind and rain. Under the oil lamp, Ning Chen looked at the forbidden technique in his hand and frowned even more. Difficult. Don't. Outside, there was a knock on the door. However, Ning Chen was focused on studying the cultivation method of the illuminating self-Tao sword and did not hear it. With a creak, the door opened and Yun Mani walked in. She was about to say something but swallowed her words. In front of her, under the light, a white-haired figure in plain clothes appeared. A silver light rose from his body, sharp and threatening. The cutting Tao sword merged with the former's sword intent and reached an extreme level. It actually showed its sharpness under the God-fiend laws that suppressed everything. Yun Mani clenched her slender hands tightly. Hesitation flashed in her eyes. This was the best opportunity. If she made a move now, he should be completely unprepared. After hesitating for a long time, Yun Mani sighed softly. She loosened her clenched hands and did not make a move. She could not forget the mission, but at least not here. Chapter 1366. It was late autumn, a cold night, and the lights were waning. In a simple hut to the east of Wei City, silver sword light rose up, dazzling everyone. Gods and demons had turned into the Wei. In Wei City, any power would be suppressed. Because of this, for thousands of years, there had been many cultivators who came to Wei City to give up on fighting and focus on comprehending their own way. However, tonight, the sword light appeared in the east of Wei City. Blocked by the wooden hut, no one noticed the dazzling sword light, except for Yun Mandan, who knocked on the door and entered. Seeing this magical scene with her own eyes, Yun Mandan's heart was in turmoil. She wanted to attack, but she suppressed it. After a long time, the silver sword light in the wooden hut gradually disappeared. Ji Ming opened his eyes and looked at the woman in front of him. He smiled and said, "Miss Yun, what's the matter?" Yun Mandan smiled back and said, "Nothing. I just came to see how your injuries are." "I'm almost healed." Ning Chen smiled and said, "Miss Yun?" "The same." Yun Mandan stepped into the hut and said softly, "Lord Ning, your cultivation seems to have improved a lot. I have some enlightenment." Ning Chen didn't hide it and said, "The understanding self-sword has helped me a lot." "Can you reach the imperial path?" Yun Mandan asked. "Not enough." Ning Chen shook his head. Even though his sword realm had improved, it was still far from making up for the loss of the demon body. The imperial path was the last realm of the 4th realm. It was almost impossible to reach it if one's heart and 3 souls were damaged. The demon body controlled the earth soul and part of the sword heart. Unless he swallowed the demon body and took back the earth soul and part of the sword heart, his heart and 3 souls couldn't be perfect. However, this choice was equivalent to giving up the demon body completely. There was no room for negotiation. In the wooden hut, Ning Chen stood up. The sword light on his body dissipated. He looked at the woman in front of him and said with a smile, "Miss Yun, I may be leaving Wei City soon." "But didn't you say you would stay for at least a year?" Yun Mandan was startled and didn't understand. Plans can't keep up with changes. Ning Chen said softly, the temple of all gods will come sooner or later. Enlightenment can't be forced. I'm lucky to have met these friends and Miss Yun. Are you lucky to have met me? Perhaps, but unfortunately he did not even know her real name. After leaving the city of Wei, do you have a place to go? Yun Mandan asked softly. I haven't thought about it yet. In the next 2 days, I will carefully think about the path to take in the future. Ning Chen replied. There is a place that young master can consider. Yun Mani suggested. Miss, please speak, Ning Chen said curiously. Northern territory of the god realm, Shuiyun clan, Yun Mandan said seriously. Ning Chen frowned when he heard this. The northern region? The divine world was vast, and the distance from the southern border to the northern border was more than 100 million miles. Even if one were to concentrate on their journey, it would still take a very long time to reach the northern border. Moreover, it was still unknown what kind of trouble they would encounter during this period. Young master's cultivation is of the cold attribute, and the Shuiyun clan is famous for their extremely cold Shuiyun technique. Empress Shuiyun is also one of the most powerful deities in the divine world. If you can become her disciple, even the temple of all gods will have to think twice if they want to trouble you. Yun Mandan said seriously. Ning Chen heard this and his eyes flashed with contemplation. Driving the tiger to devour the wolf was indeed a method, but he had always been used to freedom. Once he became Empress Shuiyun's disciple, he would not be able to do whatever he wanted in the future. After weighing the pros and cons, Ning Chen shook his head and said, Thank you for your kindness, Miss Yun, but I have no plans to go to the northern border for the time being. Yun Mandan sighed. She knew that he would not agree. Although they had only known each other for a short period of time, the sharpness of his body had already surprised her. This man who had ascended to the divine world would definitely shock the entire divine world if he was given time to grow. After a short conversation, Yun Mandan left. In the wooden house, the lights flickered. Ning Chen stood quietly in front of the window, thoughts flashing through his eyes. Perhaps the place he should go the most was the temple of the gods. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Before the temple of the gods came looking for him, he should first investigate the strength of this force. Knock knock. At this moment, there was a knock on the door again. Please come in. Ning Chen came back to his senses and said. With a creak, the door opened and the teacher walked in. He said calmly, I haven't rested yet. Teacher, you haven't rested either, have you? Ning Chen said with a smile. This is for you. The teacher handed over a letter and said calmly, If you are in danger, give this letter to the head of the Confucian sect in the Great Yu dynasty. After seeing this letter, he will help you once. Ning Chen nodded, took the letter, and thanked the teacher respectfully. He was not a pedantic person. He would not refuse such kindness. Goodbye. After delivering the letter, the teacher left without the slightest hesitation. Ning Chen looked at the teacher's back as he left, and his eyes were filled with envy. Although he did not recognize the teacher's Tao, he admired his carefree temperament. He could let go of the dynasty that he had guarded for thousands of years. This kind of decisiveness was not something an ordinary person could do. Chapter 1367. In the northern region, the rising sun flood god had arrived to denounce her. The atmosphere was tense. Facing the rising sun flood god's accusation, Empress Shuiyun's expression didn't change in the slightest. Don't you think it's too perfunctory to deny the Shuiyun clan's extermination of the Qihua clan based on your one-sided statement? In the air above the imperial palace, the sunrise flood god looked at Empress Shuiyun behind the curtains in front of him. Why should the Shuiyun clan admit to their crimes? The smile on Empress Shuiyun's face gradually faded. Rising sun flood god, I've said what I need to say. It's up to you whether you believe me or not. A cold glint flashed through the rising sun flood god's eyes, but he didn't ask any more questions. Golden flames spread out from his body. Flood god, are you going to fight in my Shuiyun palace? The woman behind the curtain asked calmly. It's been tens of thousands of years since we last met. I'm sure your cultivation has improved a lot. Why don't we take this opportunity to spar? The rising sun flood god said coldly. I'd be happy to oblige. The Empress rose from behind the curtain. In an instant, the entire Shuyun Palace was filled with frost. Ice and fire, the most extreme of opposites, had existed since the Antiquity Age and had never stopped. In the sky, the two forces clashed. Wave after wave of powerful aura rippled out from the palace, shocking the heavens. In the northern region, the experts of the god realm looked up at the sky in shock. This power belonged to the Empress. Who was the one fighting the Empress? The rising sun flood god. A powerful divine demon expert felt the scorching aura in the sky and said solemnly. The battle between the two emperors shook the heavens and the earth. The sky of the northern region seemed to crack. The battle lasted only a few breaths before the sky calmed down. Within the palace, the rising sun flood god and Empress Shuyun retracted their auras and stopped fighting. So, do you want to continue? The Empress asked calmly. There's no need. The rising sun flood god said indifferently, then turned and left. A moment later, the golden flames above the palace dissipated. The rising sun flood god's figure faded and disappeared. Inside the palace, the 8 fairies heaved a sigh of relief. The rising sun flood god was truly a god of war. His strength was terrifying. Your Majesty! The rising sun flood god wouldn't come here to denounce us for no reason. Do we need to investigate this matter? Asked a woman dressed in red among the 8 heavenly maidens. No need. Behind the curtain, the corners of the Empress's mouth curled up slightly as she smiled. This matter is related to that little phoenix. As long as Yun Mani brings that little phoenix back, perhaps the truth will come to light. The woman in red bowed respectfully and said no more. The Empress's words were never wrong. I didn't expect to meet demons from the demonic world here, Yun Mani said with a serious expression. Ningchen raised his hand, and a strong suction force spread out, swallowing all the demonic aura that scattered between heaven and earth. What are you doing? Yun Mani asked, puzzled. This demonic aura is useful to me. Ningchen said calmly, I was just about to find them. I didn't expect them to take the initiative to come to me. You need demonic aura? Yun Mani asked in surprise. Ningchen nodded and said, the purer the demonic aura, the better. Under the moon, Yun Mani was silent. After a long time, she said, I know a place that has a large amount of demonic aura, but it is full of danger. Young Master Ning, do you dare to try? Hearing this, Ningchen showed interest and said, I'd like to hear the details. The border between the God world and the demonic world, the abyss of divinity and demons. Yun Mani said seriously, the demonic world hasn't made any big movements for tens of thousands of years, so you don't have to worry about meeting people from the demonic world in the abyss of divinity and demons. However, the abyss of divinity and demons is a forbidden area, and because the laws of heaven and earth are extremely chaotic, every once in a while, the abyss of divinity and demons will be cleansed by the great Tao and completely rebuilt. So, choosing when to enter is very important. How do we enter the abyss of divinity and demons? Ningchen asked. Everywhere in the God world, there are entrances to the demonic world. There is one in the southern border. If you have made up your mind, I can take you there. Yun Mani said seriously, however, the abyss of divinity and demons is full of danger. I don't recommend you to take this risk. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, Ningchen said with a serious expression. I need a large amount of pure demonic aura now. Miss Yun, please lead the way. Yun Mani nodded and didn't persuade him anymore. She led the way. Ningchen followed behind, looking at the woman in front of him as thoughts flashed through his mind. It seemed that there was a lot of trouble waiting for him before he went to the Temple of Gods. At the same time, in the heaven stage, the green-clad heavenly lady Shui Yun flashed through the sky and rushed to the southern border. In the northeast of the southern border, Yun Mani led Ningchen over and stopped in front of an abandoned ancient city. In front of them, there were broken walls and ruins everywhere. Obviously, the ancient city had been abandoned for a long time and had been forgotten by the world. In front of the ancient city, Yun Mani said calmly, in front of us is the tearless devil city. A long time ago, this was a city of the demonic world. However, after the demonic world was defeated, the tearless devil city was completely abandoned and became a dead city. He looked at the woman in front of him and asked in confusion, "Miss, is there something you need?" "I'm just curious." The woman smiled. "Do we know each other?" Ningchen narrowed his eyes and asked. "We didn't know each other before, but from this moment on, we know each other." The woman's smile became brighter and brighter. Ningchen frowned slightly. What a strange woman. Why were all the people he met so strange? Were all the people in the divine world so abnormal? "Young Master Ning, it's nice to meet you. See you again." After saying that, the woman turned and left without saying anything else. Ningchen looked at the woman's back and his expression became more serious. If he remembered correctly, he did not introduce himself. How did this woman know his surname? As soon as he said that, waves of fire soared into the sky. The divine flame in the dark night lit up the world. The red-haired figure appeared. It was a phoenix that had been reborn. Its power was even stronger than before. The three figures appeared at the same time. The human, demonic, and phoenix swords appeared at the same time. The three swords soared into the sky. Boom! At that moment, the wind and clouds in the sky changed. The great calamity of the imperial Tao gathered crazily. Endless power of heaven and earth descended, wanting to kill those who defied the heavens. Descent of the six paths. Myriad demonic calamities. Imperial forbidden sword. The three figures rushed into the sky. The forbidden sword technique, which had never existed since ancient times, fused with the forbidden technique of the demon world. The two powers fused rapidly. In an instant, the demon phoenix appeared, destroying the world. The black demonic phoenix spread its wings and covered the sky. The shocking demonic shadow shrouded the entire vermilion bird divine city. At that moment, all the martial artists in the divine city looked at the sky at the same time. Their hearts were in turmoil. Demonic calamity. In the sky, below the giant demonic phoenix, the three figures merged. The white-haired figure stood in the sky and looked down coldly. He was like a god and a demon. There was no emotion in him. Demonic phoenix calamity. The human and sword slashed down. The demonic phoenix calamity descended upon the divine world. Its power surpassed the limits of the imperial Tao and suppressed all the experts of the divine world. Boom! The shocking move destroyed the world. With the blue-robed man as the leader, many experts of the divine palace joined forces to stop the demonic phoenix from destroying the world. Blood splattered everywhere and dyed the sky red. Under the demonic calamity, even the gods were bathed in blood. At the same time, Yun Mani appeared in the sky. The frost spear in her hand pierced through the air and pierced towards Ning Chen's chest. At that moment, the heavenly book of creation appeared in Ning Chen's hand and blocked the spear. "Are you going to be the enemy of the world by associating with the demons?" Yun Mani said in a low voice. "The world is like this. So what if I am the enemy of the world?" Ning Chen said indifferently. The three forces around him surged. The human, god, and demon gradually merged into a blood-red mark and imprinted in between his eyebrows. Extreme Tao. Yun Mani's expression changed. Not good. The extreme Tao was formed. Heaven and earth shook. In an instant, above the divine city, a blood-red sword light soared into the sky and pierced through the clouds. Their silhouettes were blurry, making it impossible to see their faces clearly. Goddess Aqua Cloud is dead. God Lord Vermilion Bird coldly said. With Goddess Shui Yun's cultivation, it's truly unbelievable that she would die in battle. A divine demon expert replied with a solemn voice. That person has already entered the demonic path, and his strength has greatly increased. Perhaps he has other techniques that we do not know of. In short, we must be careful when dealing with this person, God Lord Vermilion Bird said. Green-faced assassin has fought with him before. Let him lead the others, the third divine demon said. There's no need to doubt the strength of the azure-masked assassin, but he's too principled. Liushi, you should come along as well, God Lord Vermilion Bird calmly said. Yes. Among the 10 God-fiend experts, a man who had never spoken received the order and vanished without a trace. A white-haired and white-clothed figure strode forward across the southern border, making no effort to hide his tracks. The demonic path-knowing destiny expert was seething with demonic chi, and wherever he went, all things withered. After devouring Yao Yu and goddess Shui Yun, Ning Chen's pressure continued to rise, leaving clear footprints in his wake. The demonic path had descended upon the world, and the god realm was once again facing a calamity. On the third night, one war chariot after another appeared in the sky. There were thousands of them, each chariot carrying 9 divine generals, their auras so vast that they blotted out the moon. They're finally here? Down below, Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the flood of iron rushing toward him, his expression unperturbed. Several seconds later, the thousands of war chariots arrived. At the very front was a massive bronze war chariot, upon which stood a white-robed man, his aura abnormally terrifying. Green-faced assassin, it's your turn. The white-robed man calmly said. Yes. Behind him, a long-robed man walked out, carrying 2 halberds on his back. He looked at the white-haired man below with a complicated expression. With the order in front of him, the green-faced assassin didn't hesitate any longer and descended from the sky. Below, a cold look flashed across Ning Chen's face. He clenched his right hand, and the demonic sword appeared in the surging black chi. Boom! The green-faced assassin descended from the sky, pulling out his halberds and slashing at the white-haired man below. The sword and halberd clashed for the second time, and the rumbling shook the entire southern border. It seems that I was too merciful to spare your life earlier. Ning Chen looked at the long-robed man in front of him and said coldly, I can't disobey an order. Pardon me, the green-faced assassin replied, and the halberds pressed down on the former. Ning Chen flipped his palm, and the black chi surged, slapping at the long-robed man in front of him. This indirectly helped knowing Destiny's state and saved him a lot of trouble. In the next few days, Ning Chen didn't do anything. He just observed the Divine Lords in the Divine Hall. 5 days later, Ning Chen made sure that the Divine Lords didn't notice anything before he moved again. Half a day later, a beautiful woman fell into a pool of blood in the Divine Hall of Tianhong. Her face was full of unwillingness. Ning Chen pressed his hand on the woman's head and swallowed all her cultivation. Divine Hall had lost 2 Sir Gods consecutively. Including Sir God Lu Shi who had died in the battle previously, 3 Sir Gods had died silently in less than half a month. The situation was brewing but no one knew about it. Over the next month or so, Ning Chen visited the various temples around the Vermilion Bird Shrine one by one and killed all of their sovereigns with thunderous methods. Finally, when the 7th Divine Lord died in battle, an accident happened. Before the 7th Divine Lord died, he burned his divine soul and broke through the divine seal to escape. Ning Chen rushed out from the Divine Hall and grabbed the escaping divine soul. Demonic chi surged and swallowed it. At this moment, the last 2 Divine Lords in the Divine Halls opened their eyes and looked at the sky. In the void, a white-robed figure stood quietly with a demonic sword in his hand. Demonic chi surged around him. Ning Chen didn't hide his identity anymore. The surrounding demonic chi covered his body and he returned to his original appearance in an instant. His white robe danced in the wind. Under the moonlight, the white-haired Ning Chen stood in the air. He looked at the last 2 divine halls and said calmly, "You are the only ones left. Come out." Below, thousands of divine servants looked at the man in the sky and they were shocked. In the last 2 divine halls, the 2 divine lords, Ziyun and Chang Bai, walked out and flew into the sky. "You didn't die," Divine Lord Ziyun said. If he didn't die, it meant that Divine Lord Lu Shi was defeated. Divine Lord Chang Bai looked at the surrounding divine halls and his face grew solemn. Why did only the 2 of them come out? Where were the others? No need to guess. They are all dead. Only the 2 of you are left. Ning Chen said calmly. He raised his demonic sword and pointed at the 2 of them. He said coldly, "Come at me together. I am in a hurry." "How dare you?" Divine Lord Ziyun's face grew grave. She plunged out and attacked first. Not far away, Divine Lord Shangbai suppressed the waves in his heart. He flipped his palms and his divine vitality covered the sky. As the murderous intent approached, Ning Chen didn't dodge. He slashed with his sword and demonic qi engulfed the world. It was a shocking scene. In the void, with Ning Chen as the center, demonic qi spread and covered the entire divine city. Next, it is the world of death. As soon as he said that, there were black whirlpools around Ning Chen. The flames burned the sky and shocked the world. At this moment, countless overlords around the divine city looked in the direction of the divine city with serious expressions. In the sky above the divine city, the vermilion bird, who had held on for an hour, finally faded under the repeated attacks of the phoenix. It had reached the limit of its endurance. In this era with the phoenix, there is no need for the vermilion bird. The vermilion bird was about to die and the phoenix took form. Ning Chen walked out and pressed his hand on the vermilion bird's head. Phoenix flames swept out. With a shrill cry, the vermilion bird scattered and fused into the phoenix flames. After devouring the vermilion bird, the phoenix flames in the world multiplied in power, becoming as dazzling as the sun. The white-haired figure in the flames strode away, vanishing into the distance in a flash. In the heaven realm, the God Palace. 5 figures quietly stood in the main hall, each one of them more frightening than the last. Suddenly, the vermilion bird God Lord in the southern position opened his eyes, a cold light exploding from them. What happened? The other 3 God Palace lords in the other 3 positions also opened their eyes and asked. The vermilion bird temple has been destroyed, the vermilion bird God Lord sternly said. Oh! In the east, the azure dragon God Lord was confused. Didn't the vermilion bird temple have 10 God Lords? How could it have been destroyed so easily? I still don't know. I need to return as quickly as possible, the vermilion bird God Lord coldly said. In the center, the Qilin God Lord opened his eyes and calmly said, "Go quickly and return quickly." Understood. The vermilion bird God Lord replied and then vanished. Several days later, in the air above the vermilion bird temple, the vermilion bird God Lord returned. As he looked down at the scene of devastation, his face seethed with killing intent. The remnants of demonic qi in the world could still be clearly felt. The vermilion bird God Lord looked to the northwest and then vanished. In the northwestern territory of the southern border, the Great Yu Divine Dynasty was located. Its territory spanned millions of li and extended all the way to the western border. It was the largest divine dynasty in the southern border, one that had endured for more than 100,000 years. Even in the God world, it was a miraculous existence. The current imperial lord of the Great Yu Divine Dynasty possessed strength on par with ancient experts. With the destiny of the dynasty bolstered by his body, not even god fiends would dare to lightly offend him. The Confucian sect prospered in the Divine Dynasty, and the Divine Dynasty used the Confucian Tao to govern the world. It was rather similar to the mortal realm. In front of the Confucian sect's dragon garden, a teacher wearing a long robe walked back. The battle between the saint and the demon was extremely intense. In front of the demonic figure, the teacher formed a seal with both hands. Suddenly, the golden words around the battle scattered and turned into golden chains, locking down the demonic cultivators. Boom! The chains wrapped around the demonic figure, and the righteous aura suppressed the demonic essence. Under the saint wall, the demonic figure sank several feet into the ground, and its body was dyed red again. The red ink iron certificate's power was endless. After a few breaths of time, the demonic figure dissipated, and a white-haired figure in plain clothes appeared. The blood-stained plain clothes were abnormally dazzling. Around Ning Chen's body were layers upon layers of golden chains. The righteous aura of the Confucian faction surrounded him, trapping the demonic cultivators. The teacher stepped forward and looked at the person in front of him with a complicated expression. Then, he took the ladder and left the ancient city. One day later, in the Confucian faction's dragon garden, the teacher returned and bowed respectfully. "Where's the demon?" In front of the stone table, the Confucian faction's dragon head asked calmly. "He's locked in the dungeon." The teacher said respectfully. Why didn't you kill him? The Confucian faction's dragon head asked. Teacher, please give him a chance to change. The teacher pleaded for leniency. The Confucian faction's dragon head's eyes flashed with light. You should know that demons are the source of calamity. The teacher bowed and said, this child's nature is not bad. It's just that he became demonic due to excessive grief. Teacher, please give him a chance. He lost his heart due to grief? The Confucian faction's dragon head calmly said, you are not speaking the truth. The teacher's body trembled and he bowed his head in silence. He did not lose his heart. He chose to become demonic himself. The Confucian faction's dragon head stood up and looked at the peach blossoms in the garden. Such a demon is even more terrifying. His heart is firm and he has not lost his reason. Yet he ignores etiquette. If he is not dealt with as soon as possible, he will become a great disaster in the future. The teacher raised his head and asked, my Confucian faction has the heart meditation art. Can't this demon be saved? Heart meditation art. The Confucian faction's dragon head calmly said, his heart has never been lost. What's the point of meditating? The teacher's expression dimmed and he helplessly sighed in his heart. Dragon head. At this moment, a white-robed scholar quickly walked in from outside the dragon garden. He bowed respectfully and said, the Imperial Lord has ordered the Confucian faction to send the demon to the temple. The Confucian faction's dragon head frowned. After a long time, he said, I understand. You may leave. The white-robed scholar received the order and left. Teacher,